BMW is reaching into the mainstream with this 2 Series Active Tourer, a reasonably spacious and quite affordable family 5-seater. Mini underpinnings see this as the brand's first front-driven model, and it's certainly a classier, more interesting alternative to a conventional Scenic-style compact MPV.
Front-wheel drive and BMW? It's not often you see these two words in the same sentence. Equally unusual is the idea of any kind of BMW MPV. We're here though to look at a car that brings all of these things together. The Munich maker's 2 Series Active Tourer. It's precisely because this car is so different from anything BMW has done before that it's so perfectly pitched for the conquest sales the brand is seeking. Sure enough, over 70% of potential buyers will be new to the Bavarian marque. Many of them too will be new to the 5-seat Scenic and C-Max-style compact MPV sector this car supposedly competes in, never before having been offered a car that is in any way aspirational. This model's closest market rival, the Mercedes B-Class, is the nearest thing we've had to something of that kind in this segment. But that car isn't especially dynamic either in the way it looks or the way it drives. To be frank, it's aimed at a more mature audience. What the market needed was the same sort of thing, but with sharper looks and handling. Maybe even a bit of clever packaging too. That's what BMW has tried to deliver here. And tried to achieve for the first time without its traditional unique selling point when it comes to driving dynamics: rear-wheel drive. The Bavarians once said that they'd never abandon that, but the space-efficient front-driven platform and engine package developed for the 3rd generation new Mini proved too tempting a proposition not to install in something bearing the BMW badge. So, does it work in this smartly styled Active Tourer model? Does it feel like a real BMW? And would you want one if it did? Well, that's what we're here to find out. BMW's refusal to build an MPV has long been linked to its refusal to add its famous badge to a front-wheel drive car. Sure, the brand could have built a rear-driven people carrier, but it wouldn't have been very space-efficient. This layout simply doesn't lend itself to exemplary practicality. What it lends itself to is exemplary driving dynamics, and any BMW lacking this with power scrabbling away from the front wouldn't really be a proper BMW. Such was the market perception prior to the launch of this model. I've always thought that to be a rather simplistic perspective, one assuming that all front-driven cars are dull to drive. Have a go in any current generation Mini and you'll discover that simply isn't true. All of which prompted BMW's development engineers to wonder what they could create if they were to put their own spin on Mini underpinnings and Mini engine wear. Using a stretched version of that same Mini platform, they could, at last, create the space-efficient, front-driven, compact 5-seat people carrier they knew there was a ready market for. So, the 2 Series Active Tourer was born. With all of that in mind, on the move I was expecting this car to be far more Mini-like than most of the time it actually is. The Munich men have intentionally dumbed the responses of this 2 Series model down a little, mindful perhaps that Cooper-style go-kart-like feel is less appealing to BMW buyers and might be even less well received in the MPV segment. That said, this Active Tourer still represents a firmer riding and more driver-oriented choice than many Scenic or C-Max style buyers will be used to. Whatever the choice made of settings from the standard drive performance control system, the rocker switch for which you'll find down here by the gear stick. Ah yes, drive performance control. Now you might be familiar with this kind of thing by now. A setup that allows you to tweak the steering, throttle and stability control system thresholds depending on the operating mode you select. Gear change ×2 if, like many 2 Series active tourer buyers, you decide against the slick 6-speed stick shifter and order your car with auto transmission. Ignore drive performance control or select its most relaxed, comfort or efficient Eco Pro settings, and the travelling experience in this car, though very comfortable, isn't especially memorable. Push the rocker switch forward into Sport though, and the reaction you get immediately feels keener and more alert, though it's unfortunately accompanied by rather artificially heavy steering. Still, the whole experience does potentially become more Mini-like, with further dynamic development possible if you spend a bit of extra cash and opt for the electronic dampening setup. This works through the drive performance control system, same 3 modes, and is able to alter the ride to suit the road you're on and, of course, the mood that you're in. It makes this car, in short, a more rewarding driving companion than you'd ever have thought a small MPV could be. You might reasonably point out that this isn't saying much, and sure enough, if you switch into this active tourer from, say, BMW's 1 Series Sport hatch or even something more ordinary like a Ford Focus, and you'll notice the extra body roll around the bends. Come to this car from, say, a conventional Scenic or C-Max style MPV though, and you might well be pleasantly surprised. Under the bonnet, the range starts with the same 1.5-litre 3-cylinder petrol and diesel units you'll find in a Mini, powering the most affordable 136 brake horsepower 218i and the 116 brake horsepower 216D active tourer derivatives. Both offer quite an acceptable turn of pace, with the 216D managing 62 miles per hour in 10.6 seconds on the way to 121 miles per hour, and the 218i version improving that to 9.2 seconds and 129 miles per hour. More importantly, in both cases, there's more refinement than you might expect a 3-cylinder engine to be able to provide, and that's thanks to the addition of a balancer shaft to the unit's standard spec. The 1-litre EcoBoost 3-cylinder unit that you'd find in a rival Ford C-Max doesn't get this and can be raucously unrefined as a result. In this case though, I'm trying the variant that will probably account for the majority of sales of this car, the 218D. Under the bonnet here, there's a larger, more conventional 4-cylinder power plant offering 150 brake horsepower and far pokier performance, with 62 miles per hour just 8.9 seconds away en route to 129 miles per hour. Now, this isn't the most refined small diesel I've ever driven, either at lower speeds or at tick-over, but at cruise it settles down into a very acceptable cruising thrum. To be honest, I can't really see why you might want to go much faster in this car, but should that be your desire, then BMW will wheel out a 190 brake horsepower 220D variant. Here, there's the option of BMW's xDrive 4-wheel drive system, a setup that really comes into its own in the winter months, distributing as it can almost 100% of power to either axle, or a mix between both front and rear. Either way, the car will be kept firmly planted through the tightest bends in the foulest of weather. The extra xDrive traction aids performance too, the 0 to 62 miles per hour sprint time improving from the 7.6 seconds showing you get in the 2-wheel 220D model to just 6.8 seconds. There are pokier petrol variants too. First up, the 190 brake horsepower 220i, which uses the Mini Cooper S hot hatch turbo 2-litre unit to make 62 miles per hour in 7.5 seconds en route to 143 miles per hour. And beyond that, the fastest variant in the range, the top 225i model, which needs the additional traction of xDrive to harness its 231 braked horses. Here, 62 miles per hour is 6.3 seconds away from rest on the way to 147 miles per hour. Automatic transmission is a non-negotiable here. It's an 8-speed sport setup that features launch control and paddle shifters. There's also a more basic version of this 8-speeder offered as an option on all 4-cylinder derivatives. A separate 6-speed auto box has been developed for the 3-cylinder engines. We let BMW themselves start this off. They claim that this 2 Series Active Tourer combines dynamism, style, elegance and practicality in one cleverly packaged car. Now that sounds reasonable until you remember that the Bavarian maker has made similar claims before for similarly sized models. Cars that must also share showroom space with this one. The 5-door 1 Series, the X1 compact crossover, maybe even the 3 Series Touring Estate. These are all nice products that are good to drive and tick the dynamism, style and elegance boxes for most potential buyers. None of them, though, is especially class competitive when it comes to practicality, an unfortunate legacy of the rear-wheel drive platform they all share. It simply isn't very space efficient, which is why this Active Tourer model's switch to front-wheel drive is so significant. Just how significant only becomes apparent when you start to examine this car more closely. It sits on a lengthened version of the same platform used by the Mini Hatch 5-door and as such is significantly shorter than a 3 Series Touring, yet can swallow just as much luggage. It doesn't seek the kind of SUV-style buyer courted by an X1, yet sits its driver 10mm higher off the ground. And there's room underneath for the kind of optional 4-wheel drive system that 1 Series buyers aren't allowed to have. My favourite stat, though, relates to the rear seat space. You get more with this car than you would in a huge executive class BMW 5 Series Touring Estate. Pretty much the same kind of luggage room too if you were to opt for the 7-seat Grand Tourer model you can also ask your dealer about. Such are the benefits of switching to front-wheel drive. So yes, this car is practical, but is it also stylish? If your point of comparison is with the conventional Scenic and C-Max style 5-seat compact MPVs, then you'd certainly say so. Cover up the badges and you wouldn't necessarily guess this to be a BMW. But begin to examine the details and the Bavarian influences begin to shine through. The short overhangs and long wheelbase, the wedgy profile and L-shaped rear lights, the crisp contours and the smart swag lines all point to this Munich maker. It also seems sportier than you might expect of a car of this kind to be, courtesy of things like the steeply raked windscreen and the way that the distinctive double kidney grille is positioned lower than the headlights. Only at the rear does practicality assume priority, though even here there are high-tech touches. Examples include these vertical air-deflecting blades that sit on either side of the tailgate glass and the way the rear wiper is neatly hidden in the rear spoiler. It's attention to detail of this sort that explains this BMW's impressively sleek 0.26 CD drag factor. Plenty then to disguise the sensible virtues that cars of this kind should have. Now, though, it's time to see if this Active Tourer model could really cut the mustard in the muddy dog, smelly gym kit and family holiday-friendly world of the Mini MPV. Could you really live with one? Lift the standard electrically operated tailgate and first impressions are encouraging. There's a low sill, a wide aperture and a decently sized boot, offering 468 litres, which in BMW terms is about 30% larger than a 5-door 1 Series and about 10% larger than an X1 and only a touch smaller than a much bigger 3 Series Touring model. You'll also want to compare in terms of the wider market though, and here you're talking of a space that's close to what you'd get in a Mercedes B-Class or indeed a conventional Ford Focus or Vauxhall Astra estate. But slightly further removed from the total capacity served up by the kind of more practically oriented compact MPV a buyer of this car might consider, is something like a Volkswagen Golf SV. Forget the comparisons though. What matters is that this luggage bay is big enough to be everyday usable. So bulky items like baby buggies that you might struggle to get into some of BMW's other compact 5-door family cars, say something like a 1 Series, will here fit in quite easily. There are lashing points and bag hooks on either side of the luggage bay, plus an optional extended storage pack offers attachments like a load net to help keep things in place should you get a bit carried away on the journey back from the supermarket. Valuables are better housed in this concealed space below the floor, the folding top concealing a handy multifunction tray. If you need more room, then your first option is to take advantage of the sliding reclining rear bench functionality and either push the back seat forward or angle it into a more upright position. And if that's not enough, then the split folding backrest divides 40-20-40, so the middle part can be flattened. For example, if you want to transport something like a set of skis in between a couple of rear seat folk. If you really want to supersize your space, then the rear bench drops electronically at the touch of a button to create a completely flat 1,510 litre cargo area that can be even further extended if you've opted for the extra cost fold flat front passenger seat. With this in place, your active tourer could swallow items up to 2.4 metres long. Switch your focus from packages to people and, by and large, the news is equally good, with decent space for 3 fully sized adults, even on longer trips. Though the unfortunate middle occupant will need to sit with legs astride the kind of raised transmission tunnel you think you wouldn't need on a front-driven car. Certainly the tightly drawn roofline and high sides can make the cabin feel a little enclosed, but the large glass area compensates with an airy feel that you can add to with an optional opening panoramic glass roof. As for the seats, well, they're not of the removable kind, the sort of thing you'd get on mainstream MPV rivals like Renault Scenic and Citroën C4 Picasso. But then, I don't think many potential active tourer buyers will be cross-shopping against cars of that kind. In any case, as I mentioned earlier, this rear bench does slide in a 60-40 split, and when it's in its rearmost position offers impressively generous standards of legroom. This is further aided by the fact that there's plenty of room beneath the front seats, so even the largest pair of shoes will be able to slide under. I also mentioned the backrest's reclining function too, which here gives greater comfort on longer journeys. Arguably, though, I've left the best until last. I'm guessing that it's the upfront experience that'll really sell people this car. Light, spacious and beautifully appointed. It's a level of quality removed from any other compact MPV I've ever sat in. In fact, to be honest, it's a level of quality removed from most of the other models BMW sells, even some other quite expensive ones. It's based around this imposing layered dashboard that on plusher models like this one curves into the cabin in a symmetrical wave garnished with leather, wood and brightwork. The only slight issue with the layered moulding is that some taller front passengers may find their knees knocking against the lower section of the dash. There's also a minor issue in the way that the gear stick slightly obscures the climate controls. As usual in the brand's modern models, the iDrive infotainment setup's freestanding multifunction colour screen takes pride of place in the middle of the fascia. Though the display is not of the current trendy touchscreen variety, controlled instead by this circular rotary dial down by the gear stick. Still, if there's a better, more intuitive system of this sort currently on the market, then I've not tried it. In terms of driving position, well, it's almost SUV-like. I mentioned earlier that you're sat higher than you would be in the brand's X1 crossover model, a full 30mm higher to be exact, which means that the view out is commandingly MPV-like and makes this a fine urban runabout. Or at least it would be if the large pillars either side of the windscreen didn't slightly restrict your visibility at junctions. There are chunky pillars at the rear too, so it's just as well that a BMW fits rear parking sensors as standard. These are issues that you quickly adjust to though, and it's certainly easy to get an ideal driving position thanks to plenty of rake and reach adjustment from a smart leather trimmed steering wheel, through which you view the usual crystal clear set of BMW dials. The cabin's practical too, as that of any MPV should be. So there are decently sized door bins and cleverly staggered cup holders in the centre console. You also get a large space under the armrest that can be used to charge your phone, and a neat hidden compartment in the centre stack. Expect to pay somewhere in the £22,000 to £32,000 bracket for your 2 Series Active Tourer, depending on the spec and model you choose. Now, to put those figures into perspective within the BMW lineup, they see this car pitched at around a premium of £1,800 over the company's 5-door 1 Series model, which seems fair enough given that this Active Tourer is better equipped and about 30% larger inside. Big enough, in fact, to offer almost exactly the same level of cabin cargo space you'd get from the kind of BMW 3 Series touring model that could easily cost you £4,000 to £5,000 more. Time then to get specific with this car. Standard is SE trim, and from there, core variants like the 218i and 216D and 218 diesel versions offer plusher Sport, Luxury and M Sport trim levels. There's also the chance of specifying automatic transmission, which will be an 8-speed unit on the 4-cylinder engines that make up most of the range. If you've opted for an entry-level 3-cylinder derivative, though, you'll have to have a bespoke automatic option with only 6 speeds. The 136 brake horsepower mini-derived engine used in that 218i model is certainly a clever piece of engineering, but we reckon most potential buyers of this car will prefer to find the extra £1,000 premium that's necessary to upgrade to one of the diesels. Now, that initial premium will only get you into the base 116 brake horsepower 216D, though. Most will ideally want to stretch beyond this to the 150 brake horsepower 218D variant that I'm trying here, a model requiring a budget that should scrape in just below the £25,000 price point, even if you add a few well-chosen extras. You might have noticed that I've mentioned the 218i and 218D models quite a bit. That's because it's these versions the range is really based around. The more powerful derivatives beyond them only come with the priciest trim levels, so will require a substantial price premium that you may not be able to justify. It is, though, only on the most powerful range-topping models that you'll have the chance of trying the Munich maker's X-Drive 4-wheel drive system. It's standard on the 225i and a £3,000 option on the 220D. On to the value proposition all of that represents. Now, your perspective of which, as usual, will depend on where you think this model competes. Now, an obvious rival is the similarly priced Mercedes B-Class, which costs around the same. Or maybe one of the nicer 5-seat compact MPVs, Volkswagen Golf SV perhaps. Now, by the time you've spec'd one of those up to this BMW's level, though, you'd be looking at paying 2 Series Active Tourer money. So what else could you consider? The kind of conventional Ford Focus or Vauxhall Astra estate that model for model could save you £2,000 to £4,000, depending on the variant you're looking at? But to be honest, I don't think so. I think most likely Active Tourer customers will be looking for something a little smarter than that. Possibly a Volkswagen Golf estate or a Honda Civic Tourer would be closer to the mark. Small station wagons like these give you the space of this BMW, but again, they're not a lot cheaper once you equalise engine and spec, which will see many potential buyers probably preferring the idea of this 2 Series model, once they've also taken into account its likely better residual values. I could see customers of that kind also maybe turning to something like Audi's A3 Sportsback to match this car's low depreciation. And there's the extra incentive that the Audi could save you anything between £700 and £2,000 or so in model-for-model comparisons. The problem is, though, that it's a slightly more compact, more Spartan car with a boot around 25% smaller. Still, at least it's bigger than the vehicle that shares most under the skin with this active tourer model, the Mini Hatch 5-door. One of those could save you around £6,000 in direct model-for-model comparison with this BMW, but it's more basically equipped, much smaller inside, and has a boot half the size. In fact, Mini's slightly larger Countryman 5-door model would be a closer match at a model-for-model saving of just over £3,000. The boot size is far more comparable, but the rear seat cabin space isn't. Ultimately, then, it's probably true to say that there's nothing quite like this car. If you agree and conclude, having considered all of the options, that it is what you want, then you're going to need to know exactly how generous BMW has been with the standard spec. The answer is that all the key items are in place. So even at the base SE trim level, you get 16-inch alloy wheels, LED daytime driving lights, front fog lights, an automatic tailgate, park distance control, rear parking sensors, heated power door mirrors and heated washer jets, an alarm, a chrome finish exhaust pipe, plus auto headlamps and wipers. Inside, the sliding rear bench and the 40-20-40 split folding rear backrest is standard fit. Plus, there are niceties like 2-zone automatic air conditioning, Comfort Go keyless engine start, and the drive performance control system that, via Eco Pro, Comfort and Sport modes, allow you to alter throttle response, steering feel, and possibly gear change timing to suit the way you want to drive. Now, other standard items include a sport multifunction leather trimmed steering wheel with a speed limiter function to preserve your licence through roadworks or in urban areas. Plus, there's Bluetooth with a USB interface and audio streaming functionality, a DAB digital radio, and a decent quality BMW professional radio setup with 6 speakers, a CD player and a 6.5-inch colour monitor. Unfortunately, you have to pay extra for the extended storage package that includes things like a luggage net to help you make better use of the boot space. You could also get a bespoke folding box that can take up to 20 kilograms and is designed to stow smaller items or act as a shopping crate before folding flat when not in use. Oh, and I'd want to pay the extra. This Munich maker insists on demanding for a proper space-saver spare wheel, in preference to the fiddly BMW Mobility tyre inflation kit that's all you get as standard to help in case of a puncture. That, or run flat tyres anyway, also on the options list. Beyond these basics, further up the range or on the options list, you'll find some really desirable features. Keener drivers will want to consider sport seats, the sharper variable sport steering setup, and probably the adaptive damping system. A better option in our view than the over-firm optional M Sport suspension. You might also conceivably want full leather trim or the larger 17-inch wheels that I have here. 18 inches are also available, but will probably increase your chiropractor bills. You're on safer ground with the niceties like the opening panoramic roof, wood inserts in the cabin, heated seats, power folding mirrors, and a head-up display that'll project key driving information onto the bottom of the windscreen. Oh, and the full house Harman Kardon surround stereo system would be lovely to have too. More practical items include roof rails, a smart roof box and a bike carrier that can take 2 cycles while still letting you into the luggage bay. Now, I'd also want to look at the optional roomy black bag BMW offers with shoulder straps so that you can take it out and sling the thing over your shoulder when you're out and about. Now, when you return to the car, this attaches to the centre safety belt and can also be used as an armrest in the rear, where it features a couple of useful cup holders. What else? Well, I'd certainly want to look at the driver comfort package that adds things like cruise control and park assist to steer you into tight spaces. Or maybe the technology pack that adds things like reversing assist camera and adaptive LED headlights that turn with the bends and dip themselves at night. Don't go spending too much on items like these, though, until you've considered the merits of BMW's high-tech Navigation Plus package. Now, this gives you not only satellite navigation, but also includes real-time traffic information and access to BMW's suite of online services designed to enhance your journey by sending you up-to-date information while you're at the wheel. Things like business and stock market news, weather updates, and an array of mobile office functions. Then there are services such as Google Local Search, plus telephone directories, restaurants and hotel guides. With online services fitted, you can also use the BMW Route Planner to save your chosen route on your home computer before sending it onto your car. Safety is, as you'd expect from BMW, well accounted for, hence this car's full house 5-star Euro NCAP safety rating. You'd expect the basics: twin front, side and curtain airbags, plus the usual electronic assistance for traction and stability control. Braking too, with a neat brake drying system that keeps the brake discs free of moisture in wet weather. Now, this 2 Series Active Tourer model goes further than that, though. All variants get what BMW calls pedestrian warning with city braking. Over 30 miles per hour, this will warn you if an accident hazard is detected and pre-prepare the brakes to be optimally effective. Under 30 miles per hour at town speeds, the same process will be followed, and if you don't respond or aren't able to, the car will automatically brake itself to decrease the severity of any resulting accident. Other neat safety features fitted as standard across the range include a hill start assistant to stop you from drifting backwards on uphill junctions, and the BMW emergency call with teleservices system. In an accident, this can automatically alert the emergency services with your exact GPS location. Could be a lifesaver. Where this 2 Series Active Tourer model's mini routes really ought to pay off is when it comes to the issue of efficient running costs. Slippery aerodynamics help here. The sleek 0.26 CD drag factor is best in class. So does lightweight design. The bonnet, for example, is made from aluminium and weighs just 8 kilograms. That's about 50% less than a conventionally produced component. As usual with BMW, though, most of the efficiency gains are down to the brand's clever, efficient dynamics technology. The elements of this are copied by just about every other manufacturer in this segment, but the way the Munich maker has put them all together really seems to have hit the efficiency sweet spot. We're talking here of things like on-demand use of ancillary units, electric power steering, low rolling resistance tyres, brake energy regeneration, and an auto start-stop system to cut the engine when you don't need it, say stuck in traffic or waiting at the lights. But the driver must play his or her part, so there's an optimum gear shift indicator on the dash and an Eco Pro mode you can select in the drive performance control system that'll focus all the car systems on ultimate frugality. The extra economy created in that Eco Pro setting is fed back to the driver with in-car displays showing the additional numbers of miles achieved. Also playing its part in this model is the integral aero curtain, which used two vertical air vents in the front bumpers to direct the airstream along the front wheels. And the result of all of this efforts? Well, they're not quite enough to enable mainstream 2 Series Active Tourer models to outshine the running cost returns of potentially comparable models like Audi's A3 Sportsback and Volkswagen's Golf SV. But this BMW is able to get very, very close. The manual gearbox 150 brake horsepower 218D variant that I'm driving here will return around 68.9 miles per gallon on the combined cycle while emitting 109 grams per kilometre of CO2. Nor is there too much of that penalty for choosing an automatic version thanks to a coasting function that disconnects the engine at cruise. The other mainstream diesel option is the 116 brake horsepower 216D variant, which manages 74.3 miles per gallon and 99 grams per kilometre. If you're a lower mileage buyer and looking at petrol power, the first variant your dealer will probably direct you to is the 218i, which, like this 218D, uses a 1.5 litre 3-cylinder power plant. This one also borrowed from the Mini and putting out 136 brake horsepower. It's capable of 57.6 miles per gallon and 115 grams per kilometre of CO2. Further up the petrol range, the 190 brake horsepower 220i manages 47.9 miles per gallon and 137 grams per kilometre. And there's not too much of a penalty either for adding four-wheel drive. Take notice, Audi. Even the potent 231 brake horsepower 225i variant, which gets the xDrive all-wheel driven system as standard, manages 44.1 miles per gallon and 132 grams per kilometre. In fact, you can see just how efficient the xDrive system is by looking at the top of the diesel range, where it's an option on the desirable 190 brake horsepower 220D variant. With all-wheel drive, the combined cycle fuel consumption falls only marginally from 64.2 miles per gallon to 61.4, while the CO2 returns fall from 115 grams per kilometre only as far as 122 grams per kilometre. You could live with that in exchange for the extra winter traction. What else? Well, there's a condition-based service indicator, and those maintenance costs can be kept in check with two optional servicing packages which cover you for servicing or servicing and maintenance for 5 years or 50,000 miles. And as for insurance groups, well, to give you an idea, you'll be looking at groups 15 to 16 for a 218i, group 17 to 18 for the 218D, and from group 25 for the 220i. Did you ever expect to see a BMW model range built around front-wheel drive with an MPV body shape and offering the option of a 3-cylinder engine? I'm not sure I ever did, but then I wasn't really ready for an all-electric BMW supercar either, and we've got one of those. So this Bavarian brand is evolving. And so must the Scenic and C-Max-style 5-seat compact MPV segment in which this 2 Series Active Tourer competes. After all, even MPV buyers now realise that style and driving dynamics aren't incompatible with family versatility. Cars like this one are driving that change. Of course, the front-driven layout gives it a less driver-oriented feel than you'd find in other BMW models. The brand's traditional buyers may not like that, so it's just as well that this car isn't aimed at them. No, you'll be interested in a 2 Series Active Tourer if your need for practicality is greater than your need for a BMW, but you'd still rather like one. If that makes sense to you, then this car will too. Its closest rival, the Mercedes B-Class, doesn't have the same kind of spark, and the only other alternative is a much frumpier, more conventional mainstream brand MPV. All of which means that BMW's appealing spin on ordinary family motoring will probably attract a ready audience. People who probably never thought they'd be buying from this Munich maker. They won't be getting the ultimate driving machine because that's not what they need. Getting instead what may very well be the ultimate small people carrier will suit them very well indeed.